Forget Lenin. The real Russian Revolution may have started in a quiet Swiss bank, not the streets of Petrograd. What if the fall of the Russian Empire was engineered not by revolutionaries, but by financiers? We all know the iconic image of Lenin standing before a roaring crowd in 1917. But what if the real ignition of the Russian Revolution came from somewhere far more unexpected, behind the vaults of European banks, in secret negotiations with Germany, and via a mysterious web of money that flowed into Bolshevik hands? In this video, we unravel the hidden financial machinery behind the revolution. You'll learn how a shadowy world of bankers, war strategists, and exiled revolutionaries colluded to tear down the Romanov dynasty. What really happened behind the scenes? And why would a German banker want to fund Lenin? Let's dive in. The Empire on the Brink. By 1914, Tsarist Russia was a crumbling colossus. The empire stretched from Eastern Europe to the Pacific, but beneath the surface, unrest was boiling. The Russo-Japanese War had been a disaster. The 1905 revolution had shaken the monarchy, and when World War I broke out, the fragile imperial machinery began to break apart. Peasants were starving, soldiers were dying in the millions, and Tsar Nicholas II, an indecisive ruler, was utterly unprepared for what came next. But revolution doesn't just erupt from suffering. It needs a spark, or in this case, a transaction. Lenin in exile, the right man, wrong place. In 1917, Vladimir Lenin was in Zurich. Broke, exiled, irrelevant. The Bolsheviks were a fringe movement at best. No army, no power, no chance. But Lenin had one thing: ideas. And those ideas terrified the governments of Europe. To the Germans, they weren't just terrifying, they were useful. You see, Germany was locked in a brutal war on two fronts, the Western and Eastern fronts. If they could collapse Russia from within, they could concentrate their full military might on the West. So someone in the German high command had an idea: send Lenin back to Russia and help him light the fire. But revolutions cost money, and that's where the banker comes in. The banker who funded a revolution. Meet Alexander Parvus, a man you've likely never heard of, but who may have changed history more than Lenin himself. Parvus was a Jewish intellectual, economist, and political fixer. Born in the Russian Empire, he had spent years in socialist circles, becoming a mentor to Leon Trotsky. But Parvus had traded Marxist theory for something more potent: capitalist influence. During WWE, Parvus proposed a bold plan to German officials: fund revolutionary movements in Russia to destabilize the Tsarist regime. The Germans were skeptical until Parvus outlined how it could work. And then the money started flowing. The secret financial network. With Parvus as middleman, the German government funneled millions of gold marks into accounts that would be used to support revolutionary propaganda, strikes, and the Bolshevik Party itself. These funds were laundered through a network of front companies and shadow banks, particularly in Switzerland and Scandinavia. One of the most critical points was Nya Banken in Stockholm, where money would be quietly deposited, then dispersed to Bolshevik agents, smugglers, and newspapers. Lenin's return to Russia in April 1917, that infamous sealed train through Germany, it wasn't just a coincidence, it was part of the plan. Lenin himself acknowledged the support, though he never publicly admitted the full scope of it. The revolution accelerates. Armed with money, momentum, and returning leaders, the Bolsheviks began to gain ground. They used German funds to publish newspapers, stage rallies, organize strikes, and most importantly, undermine the provisional government that had replaced the Tsar after his abdication in March 1917. Lenin's slogans, peace, land, bread, and all power to the Soviets, found fertile soil in the chaos of wartime Russia. By October 1917, the Bolsheviks stormed the Winter Palace and seized power in Petrograd. A revolution was complete, but not entirely Russian in origin. Here lies the historical problem that has baffled generations of scholars. Did the Russian Revolution succeed on its own merit, or was it covertly manufactured by foreign money? The idea that Lenin was a German agent has been both fiercely denied and partially confirmed, depending on which archives you read. Documents declassified after the Cold War, including German military memos and Bolshevik correspondences, suggest there was indeed systematic financial support from Germany, often funneled through intermediaries. But this raises deep moral and historical questions. Did the Bolsheviks betray their revolution by accepting foreign money? Was Lenin a revolutionary or a pawn? And more broadly, how many revolutions in history were not born, but bought? The Russian case wasn't the only example of money-shaping revolutions. From the CIA funding anti-communist groups in Latin America to foreign NGOs accused of influencing Arab Spring protests, money is often the unseen hand behind political upheaval. In the case of Russia, it was paradoxical. Germany bankrolled the very ideology, Marxism, that would one day destroy half of Europe, including Germany itself. And what about the bankers? Parvus died wealthy, forgotten by the revolution he helped build. Lenin purged many who questioned the origins of their funding. Trotsky, once Parvus's protege, would later be assassinated in exile. No plaques, no thanks, just shadows. The most cinematic moment in this story remains the sealed train. On April 9, 1917, Vladimir Lenin boarded a sealed train in Zurich, bound for Petrograd. German officers had guaranteed him safe passage through enemy territory. They wanted him there. Lenin arrived with a clear mission, a handful of loyalists, and funds routed from German-controlled banks. Within months, the Romanov dynasty was gone. By the end of 1918, the Tsar and his family were executed. A centuries-old empire had collapsed, not with a foreign army, not with a bomb, but with a banker's signature and a train ticket. So how do revolutions really begin? Not always with a protest, sometimes with a wire transfer. The Russian Revolution wasn't just a grassroots uprising, it was a high-stakes geopolitical operation. A chessboard where exiled intellectuals, paranoid monarchs, and opportunistic bankers all moved pieces in a game no one fully controlled. Lenin remains a revolutionary icon. But behind his rise was the quiet influence of a man like Parvus, and a regime in Berlin willing to play with fire. And as history shows us again and again, when banks start funding ideologies, the world changes.